Good morning, everybody, and I'm sorry that I cannot be with you, but nevertheless, I would like in the short time I have to share with you some idea about medical ethics. You know, medicine is a profession that biology is sitting at its foundation, but from time to time we are forgetting that at the end of the day we are treating human beings. And human beings are very complicated, and there are numerous ethical issues. And I want to highlight for you very quickly some of the ethical issues that came up during the Corona time. Because we have, you know, the carpet of ethics is huge, and I cannot cover everything. So let's concentrate about the Corona, and if time allows, I will broaden it a little bit. So during the Corona time, there were several issues that were that had very serious ethical issues in them, and I will go via them one by one. One was the treatment priorities. Mostly it happened in New York and in Spain and in Italy that, you know, there were more severe patients that needed respiration than teams and respiratory machines. And the question was how to sort them out, how to decide who will go on the respirator and who will not go. It was clear that the decision about somebody that will not go on the respirator will be a death penalty. So physicians and nurses had to decide who will die and who will live. And if you, all what I'm going to show you is all coming from the scientific literature. And as you see here, it's taken from the Science magazine. It says Italian doctors on the coronavirus frontline face tough calls on whom to save. How you make a decision. In Israel, luckily, we didn't get to that point because we had enough teams and enough respirators, but we were on the verge. So in preparation for the possibility that we shall not be able to handle all the severe patients, we appointed a committee that made several scores: the age of the person, the diseases that he has, his family, the home, the socioeconomic, about 100 different criteria, and each of them got a score. And if you passed the score, you were able to get respiratory help. And if you didn't pass the score, unfortunately, you did not. So, you know, these are very, very tough decisions. They are moral decisions. They are not biological decisions. They are based on biological data. But at the end of the day, we decide who will live and who will die. And we decided to make it very scientifically by making about 100 different criteria that are largely, some of them are independent on one another, and then sum them up to get some number that if you fall above the number, you're okay, and if you fall below the number, then it's not so okay. Luckily, I say again, we didn't get there. The other issue is about priorities. You know, during the Corona time, especially during the first and second waves, you know, the hospitals in Israel at least, but all over the world, were closed for regular patients, heart patients, cancer patients, infectious diseases. They were left only few beds for regular patients. And I am sure, and people appreciate it, that the damage is huge. If you are postponing an operation, if you are postponing treatment of a cancer patient, if you are postponing treatment of a heart patient, then the disease will continue, will aggravate, and there will be an irreversible damage. And as you see here, climate change, for example, you know, climate change is coming up very quickly. And we were under the Corona for almost 3 years. So you see people are looking at COVID-19 in this cartoon, but meanwhile, climate change is there to drown them in the stormy ocean. So we cannot forget, once we have a major problem, we cannot forget on the other problem. And you can see on the right side from Nature magazine that AIDS, malaria, and tuberculosis are coming up, are surging in Africa because there were no vaccination, because physicians were busy with COVID patients, because there were no nurses, and so on and so forth. And the damage is huge. Not only that, but because airlines stopped flying, there was no food that was transported to areas of hunger, of famine. So there was a pandemic of hunger, you know, especially in very poor places like in some regions of South Africa. So you see that by postponing and pushing aside other problems, we are causing a lot of damage. So the question is, what is more important? Is COVID more important than heart disease, than cancer, than other diseases? And who decided to close the hospital and to make it only a corona hospital? I can tell you who decided. Nobody. It was the panic of the public and the pressure of the public on the governments and on the ministries of health, that they took all kinds of irrational decisions that only now we start to appreciate how harmful they were. I cannot blame them, of course, because everybody was panicking in the world. But nevertheless, I think that for the next pandemic, we have to be much more careful about prioritizing what we close and what we leave open, because the damage to people is huge. An example from the UK, the pandemic was, appreciated to delay cancer advances by nearly 18 months. You can imagine that drugs are late to come to the market by 18 months. Can you imagine how many lives, if these are efficient drugs that either save life or elongate lifespan? Can you imagine what is the damage to people? By 18 months, a drug that should show on, let's say, January 21 will come to the market only in September or August of 22. This is real damage, and so on and so forth, and I can bring you many other examples. The major problem was vaccination. When the vaccines came in certain countries, there was what we call vaccination hesitancy. People were hesitated whether to take the vaccine, and because of the social networks, because of Facebook, because of Twitter, there was huge misinformation about them, that the vaccination will cause genetic changes, that there will be genetic diseases, that women will become infertile. All kinds of rumors came up from non-professional sources, and therefore people resisted the vaccination. They didn't take the vaccination. Now you can imagine what is the result. The result that we cannot defeat the disease. The fact that you are today in Panama, sitting free in the lecture hall and flying all over the world is due to the vaccination, is due to this achievement. So fighting vaccination was deleterious, was very, very harmful. And there was no reason for doing it. True, the vaccine have side effects, but they are very, very rare, extremely rare. I can tell you that in Israel, we vaccinated close to 6 million people. There was not a single death case. There were few cases of heart inflammation that passed away and some other minor side effects, but not a single serious vaccination. But in return, we vaccinated 6 million people and we stopped the pandemic. And you can see here, the demonstration in the United States. Look at the lower side of the lower corner, right corner of the slide. Trust in God, not in vaccine. Or, on the left upper side, anti-vaccine movement might undermine pandemic effort. It will not allow us to remove the pandemic. Look at another one. Cure is worse than the virus. On the left lower side, in the yellow banner, the cure that we offer by vaccination is even more bad, is worse than the virus itself. Health is not found in a syringe. Your health in the lower right side, it cannot be found in the syringe, and so on and so forth. And the question is, what is it about people that they are resisting science? And I must admit that the resistance to science is very broad nowadays. It's not just for vaccination. People tell me, Aaron, I don't believe in science, but I believe in God. I tell them, you are right, because God is a religion. You should believe in God. Science is not a religion. Science is a set of testable questions that can be answered in the laboratory. Science is not God. Science is there to help us. And therefore, the issue of believing in science is a non-issue. And the reason for that is, one reason that people don't believe in science are, of course, all kinds of rumors and the social networks, the Twitter and Facebook. They made a big disservice to the community by distributing it. And I must admit that, we are talking about freedom of speech, but freedom of speech is not necessarily freedom of damaging the health of other people. And also physicians should be blamed. For example, Andrew Wakefield, I show you the covers of 2 books, a physician in England said that the vaccination against the MMR, the measles, mumps, and rubella, the triple viral diseases, causes autism. So the vaccination causes another disease, and women stopped vaccinating their children, and the result was that several thousand kids got measles and died. Now, we don't understand what Wakefield did, but he published his paper not only in books, but also in a medical journal. So we don't understand how the editor and the reviewers picked up the journal. But then it was time to take it away. But this was a scientific claim by a physician. So billions of dollars were invested in clinical trials in order to refute this issue. Vaccine ingredients, this is a collection that I made out of the literature. Vaccine ingredients do not cause autism. There is no link between vaccines and autism. Vaccines do not cause autism. MMR vaccine, worries are not justified in the lower middle part, and so on and so forth. And it took 10 years to take this paper out, to Lancet to declare that the paper was faked, that it was wrong. But meanwhile, we lost thousands of children to measles. There was another parallel example in Japan on another disease that I don't have the time to go into. And physicians are also, and then books came out, The Doctor Who Fooled the World, and so on and so forth, but this was too late to save the dead children. There was, and also what is affecting the decision of people is their social economic state. So there was a questionnaire that was distributed in the United States before the vaccine came out, just before the vaccine came out, and there was a single question there. Do you plan to get coronavirus vaccine when one is available? And look at the distribution. I will not go into all the lines. I will go only to the white and black people. The white people, 56% yes. 27% said not sure, and only 16% said no. In the black people, less than half, 25% said yes, 32% said no, and 40% said that they are not sure. Why? Because the black people don't believe the government. They don't believe whatever the government will tell them, they will say we don't believe it. Why? Because of discrimination, of long-term discrimination, that the black people are discriminated mostly in the southern part of the United States, in Alabama, in Mississippi, and so on. They simply don't believe the government. They always think that there is a conspiracy, that the government is coming with something that is there to harm them. And I think that the best example was the Tuskegee experiment, where in 1932, where people got syphilis in a black village in the United States, the physicians, the white physicians, and you see a white physician on the right lower side, inject something to the vein of a black person that had syphilis. Actually, they decided not to treat them. Not to treat a patient in medicine means to betray your oath as a doctor. And they decided to follow the natural course of syphilis and not to treat them, and instead to inject them with water. And 400 patients in Tuskegee were injected with water instead of with a drug for syphilis. 200 of them died. Because if you treat the disease early, you can prevent the progression of the disease to the brain. This was a clinical trial that used people as rabbits, black people as rabbits, by American licensed government physicians. So now you see that it's not only the social networks, it's also the medical establishment that contribute to the disbelief, to the distrust of people in the government. So let's go now to another issue that I mentioned already, and that's the infodemic. The infodemic is the misinformation, disinformation, and of course the social networks like Twitter and Facebook were very active in that. And just to give you an example, the President of the United States was probably one of the masters in distributing misinformation about the beneficial effect of hydroxychloroquine, of ivermectin, and actually he didn't let the doctor, the physician, Anthony Fauci, to talk. He actually pushed him aside when they came together for an interview, and he became, the physician of the country. And the same was for Madonna. And it's very difficult to understand why Madonna did it, but she complained in her, in her Facebook and in Twitter that there is a vaccination already, but the vaccination is made by the rich people for the rich people. And the reason is that the rich people want the poor people to just go away, and the world will be better because there will be no economic problems and no poverty and so on and so forth. So you see what these influential people, that people believe in them. I don't have any followers on Facebook or Twitter, but Madonna has millions of them. So you can imagine the impact of misinformation and disinformation. And the issue is to limit the freedom of those networks from distributing, from disseminating wrong information that can hurt people, that can affect the health of people. The damage was really huge, really huge. And the last issue is, of course, inequality and discrimination. Racism is coming up when people are starving, when the economy is going down, when there are problems for people. The hatred is coming up. In the United States, it was hatred to the black people. And you remember probably very well the black person in Minnesota that was murdered by the white policeman, by Chauvin, and that led to the rise of a new movement in the United States, which is called Black Lives Matter, that the life of a black person also matter, which probably white people didn't think so, and so on and so forth. But what's interesting is the discrimination is not only of black people by, I would say, primitive white people. It also penetrated the scientific establishment. And you see from Cell and from Nature, see what they publish. Science has a racism problem. A white senior academic still resists recognizing racism. Well, this is not an overt racism that in universities people point to the fact that, black people are inferior, but it's subtle, it's underneath the table, and it's there. I think, however, that the scientific community took it seriously, and it's making now any effort to try and remove discrimination, not only of black people, but also of women. So what I tried to do for you now was, and I think that my time is coming to an end, is to take a disease, COVID-19, that nobody thought that will be associated with ethical issues, and to show you that many issues that are non-biological and not related directly to the pathology of the disease, to the respiratory effect, to the development of a vaccine, are there. For example, the vaccination hesitancy, the disinformation, the racism, the priority of treatment, and the postponement of treatment of other diseases. So I think that as physicians and as human beings, whenever we are hit by a disease, we should think broader than just the bed of the patient and the treatment that he gets in the hospital, but we should think of the patient in a much broader term, feelings, families, what it means, how to convince people with different prejudice, people that come from different educational backgrounds, people that are coming from different beliefs and so on and so forth, in order that at the very end, the achievements of science will be accessible to everybody. So I will end up here, and again, apologize for not being able to do it physically. I hope that next year, wherever a nice place that Florian will pick up, I will be able to participate physically in this extremely, extremely exciting convening conference. And I wish you a great success in this conference, exchange of ideas, wonderful dinners, enjoy the sea. So thank you very much for your attention.